What happens when a powerful CEO walks into her own business in disguise and is treated like she doesn't belong? It was just past noon when Naomi Ellis stepped out of her rental sedan and stood under the blazing sun outside the Ellis Prestige Motors showroom in Beverly Hills. Her outfit was simple: dark jeans, a clean blouse, a soft head wrap tied low behind her head. No designer bag, no entourage, just her, holding a leather-bound notebook and a quiet determination. Most people walking past her would have had no idea who she was, but a few clicks into a Google search would tell you. Naomi wasn't just the CEO of Ellis Prestige Motors. She was the company, a brilliant strategist, a barrier-breaking founder, and the first black woman in US history to own a luxury automotive brand with dealerships on both coasts. But that wasn't how she was greeted when she walked through the glass doors of her own flagship location. The showroom was immaculate: sleek marble floors, crystal lighting, polished glass cases, and parked dead center like a crown jewel was the EPM Evora, a $400,000 handcrafted supercar designed by Naomi herself. She stood near the entrance for nearly 3 minutes before anyone acknowledged her. A sharply dressed male associate passed by, glanced at her once, and kept walking. Another, a tall woman in heels, offered a tight smile but no words. Finally, Naomi approached the front desk where a young receptionist looked up without lifting her head from her computer. "Can I help?" "You?" Naomi returned the smile. "Yes, actually. I was hoping to get a closer look at the Evora." The receptionist's lips tightened slightly. "That model is by appointment only, and it's currently reserved." Naomi glanced around the empty showroom. "Reserved?" The receptionist nodded. "Yes, it's our policy not to let just anyone." She didn't finish the sentence, but Naomi heard enough. She raised an eyebrow. "Interesting." Just then, a well-dressed white couple entered the showroom. The man wore a tailored linen suit. The woman had on designer sunglasses and a sparkling handbag. Within seconds, the same sales associate who had ignored Naomi approached them with a wide smile. "Welcome. You must be here for the Evora preview. Can I get you an espresso while we prep the vehicle?" Naomi turned slowly, watching the interaction unfold like a scene from a movie she'd seen too many times before. They were escorted to the VIP lounge. The lights above the Evora came to life. The car was moved forward. She stood there, invisible, in her own house. Naomi didn't react. Not with anger, not with confrontation. She simply pulled out her phone, opened the Notes app, and typed 3 words: "It's still happening." Then she turned and walked out. The moment the showroom door closed behind her, she tapped a contact. "Maya, East Region Admin. Pull footage from Beverly Hills showroom. Save all audio from yesterday and today. Quietly. I'll explain later." She hung up before there was a reply. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about how many people had walked into that building and been made to feel less than. She wasn't sure what she would find next, but she was absolutely sure of one thing. She was going to keep watching. Sometimes, the most expensive thing in the room is the truth everyone's afraid to name. The next day, Naomi Ellis returned to the Beverly Hills showroom, this time in a borrowed sedan that needed a wash and wore plates from a modest suburb. She wore sneakers, an old hoodie, and no makeup. Her once polished presence was now deliberately quiet. To everyone else, she looked like someone who couldn't possibly afford a car that cost more than most homes. To Naomi, she looked like hundreds of customers her staff had probably dismissed. She entered just before 11 a.m. and sat in the far corner of the customer lounge, sipping a bottled water she brought herself. For nearly 40 minutes, no one approached her. She watched sales associates float toward other guests, white, wealthy-looking, visibly on brand. Naomi took notes, names, body language, phrases. Then she saw someone else watching too, Maya, mid-20s, smart eyes, quiet. She worked the front desk, but never joined in the forced laughter or condescending glances. She glanced toward Naomi more than once and eventually approached. "Hi," she said softly. "You've been here a while. Can I help you?" Naomi looked up and smiled. "I'm just admiring." Maya hesitated. "Well, if you're here for the Evora, I should tell you. It's usually by appointment only, but—" She looked around, lowered her voice. "I can ask someone to let you see it." Naomi tilted her head. "You don't sound sure." Maya looked down. "I've seen what happens when I suggest that to the wrong person." That night, Naomi invited Maya for coffee outside of work. They sat on a patio overlooking the city lights, two women from different generations, tied by a silent understanding. Naomi leaned in. "I need you to tell me the truth. Not what's in the handbook. What actually happens in there." Maya exhaled slowly. "There's an unspoken list. A list of who's worth the time, who gets approached, who doesn't. It's not official, but we're coached. We're expected to follow it." "By whom?" "Richard," Maya said. "The GM." Naomi's jaw clenched. Maya went on. "He says luxury isn't just about the product. It's about the person. If someone doesn't look the part, we're told to steer them toward used inventory or politely discourage them." Naomi stared into her drink. Her voice was calm, but tight. "And how long has this been going on?" "As long as I've worked there," Maya whispered. "Maybe longer." The next day, Naomi returned as herself. This time, she walked in wearing a black blazer, heels, and a pair of sleek designer sunglasses. The receptionist jumped up. "Ms. Ellis, we didn't know you were coming in today." "I didn't want you to." Within minutes, the staff scrambled. Coffees were offered, smiles beamed. The Evora was prepped like royalty was coming. She walked past it all and straight into the general manager's office. Richard, a silver-haired man in his 50s, stood as she entered. "Miss Ellis, what a pleasure. We weren't expecting—" "I've been here 3 times this week," she said coldly. "Once as myself, twice not." Richard blinked. I wasn't informed." "Exactly," she snapped. "And you know what I saw?" He didn't answer. "I saw my customers, our customers, judged, ignored, dismissed, based on how they looked, where they came from, what they wore." Richard laughed nervously. "It's Beverly Hills. We have to be selective. There's an image to maintain." Naomi stepped forward, voice razor sharp. "Let me be very clear. Discrimination is not branding. It's a liability. And you've just confirmed everything I needed to hear." She dropped a flash drive onto his desk. "Surveillance footage, audio recordings, witness statements, all ready." Richard's face drained of color. Naomi turned without another word and walked out, her heels clicking across the marble floor like a gavel. You can hide bias behind policies, behind numbers, behind power. But when truth enters the room, it speaks for itself. 2 days later, Ellis Prestige Motors HQ in downtown Los Angeles was flooded with executives. Every regional director, every board member, every senior leader in operations, PR, and legal had been summoned for what was labeled a confidential executive review session. The energy in the room was tense. No one knew what was coming. And then Naomi walked in. Black dress, hair pinned, heels steady. No smile. She carried a tablet in one hand and a folder in the other. "Thank you all for coming," she said calmly. "What you're about to see may be difficult to watch. It should be." She tapped the screen. The lights dimmed. Footage began to roll. From the security feed, Naomi's first visit, standing near the Evora, being ignored. The same staff member, rushing to help the white couple only minutes later. Next, audio clips. Voices recorded during her second visit in disguise. Not her type. Don't waste time on that one. We know who's serious. You can feel it. Then came the kicker. A transcript of her private conversation with Richard, the general manager, projected in bold. Discrimination is not branding, it's a liability. The room was dead silent. Naomi stepped back into the light. This wasn't about a misunderstanding, it was about a pattern, a culture. And I refuse to let my name, my mother's name, be tied to a system that quietly tells people they don't belong. Someone from the board finally spoke. Is this isolated to one location? No, Naomi said firmly. It's happening, in subtle ways across at least 5. Same training language, same behavior. The PR director swallowed hard. This is going to go public. Naomi nodded. It already has. She pulled up her phone and opened a press release. Anonymous sources confirmed discrimination at luxury car brand. It had been leaked by Maya. She sent the recordings, Naomi said, not to destroy us, to save us. One board member, older, skeptical, leaned in. So what's the play here, Naomi? Damage control? No, she said. Cultural reset. She passed the folder down the table. Inside, a detailed plan titled Project Mirror, a corporate overhaul initiative centered on bias training, transparency, and customer inclusion. And if we don't? Someone asked. Naomi met their eyes. I walk, and I take the story with me. Outside the building, news vans were already arriving. Inside, the boardroom lights came back on. The vote was unanimous. Richard was fired that afternoon. The most powerful revolution doesn't come from breaking the system. It comes from remaking it with your own hands. 2 weeks later, the Ellis Prestige Motors dealership in Beverly Hills looked the same on the outside. Sleek, pristine, polished. But inside, everything had changed. Gone was the stiff receptionist, who once sized customers up before speaking. Gone were the outdated client profiles that had quietly dictated who received attention and who was shown the door. In their place stood something radical in its simplicity, human dignity, and, at the heart of it all, was Naomi Ellis. She didn't just replace the manager, she restructured the entire hiring system. All employees were retrained under a new protocol called Project Mirror, which Naomi described as a reflective process, because when we look at our customers, we should be seeing people, not profiles. And beside her on the launch day press tour, Maya, promoted, empowered, seen. The young woman who once kept her voice down now stood in front of cameras with confidence, explaining how Ellis Motors would now work with community outreach groups to ensure dealership culture stayed grounded in real-world experience, not showroom elitism. Online, the story had gone viral. Drive with Dignity trended globally. Articles celebrated Naomi's leadership, not just as reactive, but visionary. She didn't bury the scandal. She confronted it head-on and used it to lift others. A month later, she was invited to speak at a national summit on business ethics and corporate equity. Her speech was brief, but unforgettable. When I stood in my own showroom and was treated like I didn't belong, I realized something painful. We weren't broken, we were blind, and that's worse. But now our eyes are open, and once you see clearly, you can't go back. That evening, as the sun set over the glowing facade of the dealership, Naomi walked the floor quietly. She stopped in front of the Evora, the same vehicle she'd been told she couldn't touch just weeks before. And this time, a teenage girl stood beside it with her father, both wide-eyed. The girl looked up at her. "Do you work here?" Naomi smiled gently. "Something like that." The girl pointed to the car. "It's really pretty." Naomi crouched beside her. "So are you," she said softly. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong near something beautiful." The girl beamed. And in that moment, Naomi knew. She hadn't just saved her company. She'd rewritten its soul.
She wasn't trying to impress anyone. Just a quiet woman, walking into a high-end dealership. Curious, polite, maybe a little out of place. Brielle wasn't dressed in designer clothes, and she didn't flash a fancy purse. She just walked in, looked around, and smiled at the cars she'd only ever dreamed about. But to the manager, that smile was a problem. He looked her up and down, and didn't see a potential customer. He saw someone who, in his mind, didn't belong there. So before she could even ask a question, he stepped in. Visuals of confrontation, him pointing, her looking stunned. He raised his voice, loud enough for others to hear, mocking voice. "Ma'am, these cars aren't for window shopping. Try somewhere more, in your budget." And just like that, he dismissed her, publicly, cruelly, and without knowing a thing about who she was, she walked out. Silent, embarrassed, eyes low, and not a single person stopped him. That night, she didn't want to talk about it. She just said the day had been long, but her husband, Marcus, he saw it in her eyes. The way she played with her food, the way her smile didn't quite reach. He asked what happened. She hesitated, but then told him everything. Word for word. There was silence. Then Marcus stood up. Calm. Controlled. "What dealership did you say?" The next morning, a Royce Phantom rolled up in front of that very same dealership. Heads turned, phones came out, and staff straightened their ties. Out stepped Marcus, tailored suit, polished shoes. Calm power in every step. The manager, the same one who had humiliated Brielle, rushed over with a rehearsed smile. Manager. "Sir, welcome to—" Marcus cutting him off coldly. "I'm here to meet the man who threw my wife out of this dealership yesterday." Silence. The smile on the manager's face vanished. The color drained. And suddenly, he realized, he hadn't just insulted a woman, he'd insulted the CEO's wife. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply called the staff together and said, Marcus firm but calm, "Business ethics isn't just how you treat the wealthy. It's how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you." The manager was removed from his position that same day. And as for Brielle, she returned a week later, not as a customer, but as the face of the dealership's new kindness and inclusion campaign, because you never know who someone is or who's watching. Be kind. It costs nothing. Subscribe for more real-life inspired stories like this.